All right, so we are now recording. All righty, so this old dude is Darwin. I don't know how old he was when this picture was taken. Back then he might have been 45. I don't know, but he sure looks like he's in his 70s or 80s right here. But he had a great quote, and the quote is, of course, about species and animals and stuff, but it really applies to the world of strategy. And in essence, what he's saying here is the species and as animals, you better adapt to what's being thrown at you. And the same thing holds true for brands. And so fundamentally, it is ultimately about change. That's the adaptation part, most responsive to change. So COVID comes in. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And organizations who were able to deal with that relatively quickly and who had no pre-existing situations like too much debt, were really struggling with their customer base, were struggling going online. So if they were already doing that before COVID, then they were going to go down. And we'll talk more about the brands that really struggled right after COVID. But this guy really called it, you know. I mean, he's long gone, but it's about responsiveness, and it's about us as humans being responsive too. I mean, I never did Zoom, you know, and nor did a lot of my colleagues, and we had to figure it out. You had to figure it out. We've all had to figure out how to navigate, and you've got to figure out how to navigate and get your degree through online, and I've had to figure this out myself. So I'm going to hit this right out of the gate. In our world, whether you know wherever you are, we all, every one of us suffers from this cognitive dissonance, and so it's about new information comes in to us. We read something and it goes contrary to what we believe to be true, and a conflict occurs in our mind about that. And so it's very easy for us to get upset about it, and we reject it or explain away or even avoid the new information. And we do this by rationalizing to ourselves that no conflict really exists. So, you know, once you get older, like me, you know, you got to start worrying about your diet. And one of the things you have to stay away from is trans fats for sure. And many foods have gotten a lot better by eliminating trans fats, but you know, I just have to be very careful about it. And so, but if you were to put a bag of Doritos in front of me right now, I'd probably crush it in a second, even though I know I would rationalize it. Oh, this is just one time and I can get away with it. My doctor won't get mad at with me. I won't tell him. It's not going to have that much of an effect on my blood. It's not going to send too much calcium into my heart, into my different arteries and stuff. So we rationalize away any potential reality, you know, that's going on. And so we live in our bubbles, and so our friends, our family often, but not always, tend to reinforce what we think is true. And so this has such an important aspect for strategy, because part of strategy is going out and doing research and finding out about how your brand is being perceived, the good, the great, the good, the bad, the ugly. And so if I am a strategist and I collect data and I present back some data that's a little tough for you to hear, it's easy for you as a CEO or a senior executive in the organization just to rationalize it away. And so one of the things I have to do when I give feedback is I have to create readiness. I have to get people to hear difficult news. And so I'll be coming back to this notion of cognitive dissonance quite a bit during the course of the semester. Now, what cognitive dissonance creates is this: paradigms. And so we all operate with paradigms. We have to, because they give us some level of comfort. We wake up, we go to work or school, we come home, we go to bed. Now within that structure, it's a structure. We go to the gym, maybe we work out, or if you have children, you pick up your children from school. So we have, if you go to Bible classes, you go to your Bible classes, whatever it is. But paradigms are what keeps us feeling safe. And so what, and there's muscle memory attached to that. So before COVID, our paradigm was the traditional in-class lecture where I'm wandering around, getting, to know you one-on-one better. And I love that. And that was my paradigm. I had the opportunity to teach into the online MBA program when the first idea came up, and I didn't want to do it. And so I rejected the idea of moving outside my paradigm. Well, COVID changed that. I became an online professor. The dude who was teaching the graduate online MBA class left, very close friend, left ECU. They needed somebody to do it. They called me. I said, okay. And I just literally finished my first online MBA section, which was synchronous, where, I did meet the students, but it was for a brief hour and a half, 2 hours every Wednesday night. Other than that, all the lectures were pre-recorded and everything. So I was able to bust out of my paradigm, but guess what? Now we're back in a new paradigm. And back in the new paradigm for many people is, I like this teaching online. My MBA students many of them don't want to come into the classroom now. I've got 22 of them. And we had my first lecture last Thursday night. 8 came, 14 didn't. And so we'll see how the rest of the semester goes. But, it's easy. We create this muscle memory of a paradigm. So let's talk about Walmart to start off the gate. Walmart, talk a lot about Walmart. And Walmart was in a paradigm when online retailing came about. They rejected the idea. They displayed a lot of cognitive dissonance because their whole business model is predicated on brick and mortar, revenue going through their brick and mortar stores. Why in the world would they want to sell product online? That would cannibalize their primary business model, which is all about brick and mortar. And so they half-heartedly tried to go online. They started their online Walmart.com out of Bentonville, Arkansas. They couldn't get any developers. They moved it to Silicon Valley area because there were so many developers working for Facebook and Airbnb and other places. And those guys were saying, why would I go to work for Walmart? And so they continued to struggle with it. And finally, they made the decision. The only time they could figure it out was to buy Jet.com. That was an acquisition. So we'll be talking about acquisition as a way to drive your growth. So they figured it out. But it took them a long time. And there's a term called core rigidity that I'll talk about in another module. But Walmart was operating with a paradigm. They broke out of it. Now, you can also look at Walmart as a paradigm in terms of its brand. So if I were to say to you, what are the first two adjectives that come to mind when, I say Walmart? So put them in the chat. Let's see what you say. What are the first two adjectives that describe the brand called Walmart? What do you think it would be? What's number one? What's the most convenient? That's it. First two. Yay. Cheap and convenient. That's it. That's their brand. That's their position. They don't try to say customer service. They don't try to say high quality products. It's cheap and convenient. And there's a paradigm around that. The first 3-4 chats out of the gate were defining the brand. Walmart has done a fantastic job selling their brand to you and I, and it's created a paradigm around it. Now, can Walmart bust out of that paradigm? They want to. So they're not really experiencing cognitive dissonance because they would love to add something to that cheap and convenient, but they haven't done it yet. And they've tried. They tried with environmental responsibility. We'll talk a lot about Patagonia this semester. Their CEO went to visit the CEO of Patagonia and said, how can we become a more environmentally sustainable company, but they couldn't do it. Why? Because that would mean their promise around being cheap would be threatened. So Walmart stays in this cheap and convenient, not great at customer service. Stores aren't that clean. It's bumping cars when you go in there oftentimes, but they got a very compelling value proposition. And so Walmart operates in a paradigm in many respects, but it has learned how to operate in a way that continues to drive growth. So where Walmart was in a real big paradigm and displayed cognitive dissonance for years, they have now been able to figure out how to bust out of that and drive growth. Here is a brand that is stuck in the wilderness. They're in brand wilderness. They are one big, huge paradigm. The one dude who is displaying cognitive dissonance is their CEO, Eddie Lambert. He does not get the power of brand. He does not get the power of culture. So he's got them locked into the status quo. And I don't know how they survived out of the pandemic, to be honest with you, but they're still around. We'll see what happens. So this is another brand. You know, we think about Harley Davidson, and you know, it's been an iconic brand for decades. The growth of Harley Davidson really started back in 1969 when this movie was released. And so I was a young pup at the time. I remember when the movie came out, I had to sneak to go see it. My mom found out that I had seen it and she got really mad at me. But this was about two guys, Dennis Hopper, Peter Fonda, both have passed on since, but it was about open, you know, on the road, independence, coolness. And so what else was happening in 69? Woodstock was happening in 69. The Vietnam War was happening in 65. So these two guys really epitomized the younger baby boom generation. And what it also did was it vaulted Harley Davidson to iconic status. But the millennial cohort, which is actually bigger than the Harley Davidson cohort, aren't connecting with this brand. And Harley's working really hard at trying to get the millennials to like them. I don't know if you've heard of Bonnie Raitt. I know your mom and dad know about Bonnie Raitt. She's a good singer. She has a song and it goes, "I can't make you love me if you don't." And so, you know, Harley could try all they want, you know, to get the millennial to love them. And if you go to their Instagram page, if you go to a lot of their advertisements, they're trying really hard to connect with the millennials. But yet the new film, you know, that is somewhat similar to Easy Rider is, you know, the John Wick series, and especially the last movie. I am a peace loving dude. I mean, you know, I do own a 22, but I don't really like guns that much. But I love John Wick. You know, I mean, I watched it this weekend. I had NBA, online NBA, and got home about 3:30 Saturday, 2 days. It was intense, but I was exhausted. And so I just plopped myself on the couch and turned down the tube, and there was John Wick. So I just I called it Shawshanked when I really see a movie and I just say, okay, I'm going to watch this movie. But the bikes in his last movie, Yamaha MT-09, and then actually Keanu Reeves actually is an investor in another motorcycle brand that's coming out. So, you know, the Rocket Pockets, you know, whatever you call these types of bikes, I mean, they have tended to appeal more to Gen X and millennials, but Harley Davidson is fighting really hard for it. Their primary customer, and I'm talking about Harley Davidson, has been the male baby boomer for really since the 70s, 80s, 90s. So, you know, for almost 4 decades, but those guys are, you know, they can't hold up the bike right now. They're going into assisted living, or maybe they're passing on, but the core customer base for Harley Davidson is going away. And the only way a brand can survive, and we'll be finishing up on this, is to have a demand for a product. There has to be a constant demand for the product. So when we look at the whole course and what we're going to be talking about this semester and what my emphasis is going to be, it's really going to focus on three things. One, you get to really understand a brand big time. Lowe's will be your individual assessment. I've created other, I think seven brands that 7 teams will be analyzing, but you got to diagnose it. You got to collect data. You conduct secondary research. You conduct primary research. You talk to people. You experience it yourself, and you draw conclusions from that. And then you say, okay, here's what the data said. Here's the philosophy. Here's the brand itself. What do we need to do to improve the brand, to improve the company? And those become a set of coherent actions. And I call them bets to implement a brand's guiding philosophy or brand position, a bet. So let's go back to Walmart for a second. We know Walmart's cheap and convenient. And they made a bet a few years ago to open up a dairy plant in Indiana. And so they invested a lot of money in that. They made the decision, that's called vertical integration, where you're actually taking control of your supply chain. I'm sure my supply chain students in the house know that. We'll talk more about that later in the semester. But they built this milk plant, huge milk plant. And then boom, they got it going. And so they started selling milk. Within 4 months of that Walmart milk plant opening up, 2 of the nation's largest dairies, Borden and Dean Foods, filed for bankruptcy. So that Walmart decision, that bet, had a huge impact on the market space of milk. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But then Walmart made a bet, and Apple made a bet. Apple streaming video, Tim Cook and his team decided to go into streaming video. Now, if you think about it for a second, and for those of you who are into movies and that sort of thing, making a movie is extremely different than making an iPhone or making a portable music device or making a watch or making a computer. I mean, making a computer and making a movie are 2 completely different elements, and each require a unique set of competencies and capabilities and resources, etc. But Apple made a bet. Apple made a bet that they can get a return on investment by moving into streaming video. So when we talk about return on invested capital, the bets that we make when we're doing strategy, you have to get a return on that bet. It's just like going to Las Vegas. You put $100 and you hit the jackpot and you get a return on that $100. Maybe you get $500. So you got a really good return on that $100. Or maybe you put $100 in the slot machine and you lost every penny. You didn't get a return on that. Business is the same way. Apple is investing in streaming video to the tune of billions, and they need to get a return on that. Walmart invested in their dairy, and they got to get a return on that. Aldi has invested $5 billion into coming into the United States to become the 3rd largest supermarket. They got to get a return on that. So let's talk about sushi. Sushi is an interesting product. And so if you think about sushi for a second, and if you go to Kroger, or if you go to Wegmans, or you go into any supermarket that's got a little bitty sushi bar, for the most part, those sushi bars are probably going to cost maybe $16,000 or so to build. Not huge. if they're 6 feet, when I say 6 feet, the case itself is 6 feet. Some sushi bars are 12 feet. So if they're 12 feet, then obviously it's going to be more expensive. But let's look at a 6-footer. 6-foot sushi bar costs $16,000 to build. Now, first thing the company needs to decide is, are we going to do the sushi ourselves, or are we going to outsource it to a company that we feel would do a better job? And so that's, it's a big decision on making the bet to put in sushi. Do we do it ourselves or do we outsource it? A lot of supermarkets decide to outsource it because you're dealing with raw fish, and you just got to be really careful from a food safety standpoint. So they hire a company, sushi company, to come in and to make the sushi for the sushi bar. And so you've seen the sushi chefs, there are 2 or 3 of them, and they're making this sushi every day. And then they put it into the cooler in front of them. And then you come in, if you buy sushi and you take a package, maybe you buy a California roll, or you get one of the other types. And if the California roll is $7, then that sushi company says, okay, tick, tick, that's a $7 transaction. So the way it works when the supermarket hires their sushi partner is they will negotiate minimum 20% of every dollar sold in that sushi bar. So if the sushi bar sells $10,000 worth of sushi in a week, what does the company get? $2,000, right? You follow me? So the sushi bar opens up. Sushi bars quickly, first week, sells $10,000 worth of sushi. They write a check for $2,000 to the company. Second week, they sell $10,000 worth of sushi. They give another check, $2,000. So how many weeks does it take for the company to break even on the $16,000? Right, 8 weeks. And so it takes 8 weeks to get their money back, and then anything sold after 8 weeks is all right to the bottom line. So that's 48 weeks times 2,000 a week. And so all of a sudden, right, you following me? This little bitty 6-foot sushi bar is generating $90,000 to $100,000 of profit a year to that supermarket. And so sushi bars are and have been one of the best investments, little investment, because the supermarket's going to these days cost 14 million, 15 million, sometimes 20 million to build. Well, the sushi bars are, at least $16,000. I know many of them are probably more. Back in my day, it was 16. And you get a huge return on invested capital for it. Huge. And so right now, the supermarket industry is trying to figure out what's the next sushi, that they can put in the store and get that kind of return, because it's been one of the best decisions that supermarkets have made in a long time. The idea started in Seattle with a company called QFC, Quality Food Centers. And they decided to put sushi into their supermarkets. And the question becomes, why did they come up with the idea? I mean, sushi had been around for thousands of years. It was part of the Japanese and other Asian cultures. Well, guess what? Seattle has a large Japanese population. And so it was a smart thing to do. You understood your customer base, and lo and behold, they just kicked butt. And 2 companies were the next 2 to put it in, simply because one of those companies went to visit this company for a whole other reason, found out about sushi, and they both put him in. And one of those companies was Gennardi Supermarkets in Philly, and the other was here in Richmond, Ucrop Supermarkets, of course, the company I work for. So sushi was a phenomenal investment. And what's interesting is we've got 35 students in this class. And what I know is that not every one of you likes sushi. As a matter of fact, some of you are probably terrified of sushi. The thought of eating raw fish makes you sick to your stomach. But for those of you who like sushi, it's rather addictive. And it's what we call a destination product. So the sushi, does really well. And we got a whole bunch of restaurants in town, sit down restaurants that are selling sushi as well. So Walmart opens a dairy, invest millions, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars in it. They got to figure it out. Apple has invested in streaming video. They got to figure it out. Aldi coming to America wants to be the third nation's largest supermarket. They've invested $5 billion. They got to figure it out. You got to get a return on investment capital. And that is what we mean by bets. So when you do your research on Lowe's, you're going to come up with 3 bets for me. You're going to tell me, Professor, here are the 3 things based on my research and my understanding of their brand that Lowe's needs to do. So what happens is you have your brand, you're chugging along, you're doing pretty well, and then all of a sudden an event occurs. And these events that are created by driving forces are oftentimes called inflection points. And so inflection point is an event. It can come from inside the company. Steve Jobs passing away was an inflection point for Apple Computer. The terrible things that Wells Fargo did was an internal inflection point with respect to their making up fake accounts and stuff. The Volkswagen, what they did with the emission scandal. So, or they can be external like COVID, or it could be external like tariffs, or it could be external like a cohort, a demographic cohort was a core customer aging out and dying off. Whatever the event is, whether it's external or internal, has the potential to change the way a brand thinks and acts and shapes the direction of our growth trajectory. My dad died when I was 14. He was 57. He died, he had a heart attack shoveling snow. And as a result of that, we left Syracuse, New York. I'm the youngest of 5. And my mother decided to get me out of Syracuse and move me down to Fort Lauderdale. That was an inflection point for me. 2, he died in January. We were gone by June. So I had 2 major inflection points, his death, and then moving to an area that I had no friends. I didn't know what was going on. And boom, that had a major effect on me in terms of who I was as a young adolescent and my growth and that sort of thing. We all have those things, in our lives. Sometimes we get sick. My brother's wife died of COVID last October, and it's still incredibly difficult for him. And me trying to be a supportive, he's my older brother and became my father figure after my dad died, but he's struggling with it. So, his name is Jim, and I was going to call him today, but I'll probably call him tonight and just check in and see how he's doing. I mean, I love him. He's my brother. And, so he hasn't figured out what's happening, but it's going to have an effect on how he lives the rest of his life without question. So we deal with these personally, and we deal with these from an organizational standpoint. So a huge inflection point occurred in 2008 with the reset. It was the Great Recession. We were over levered, killed the housing market. And I worry about what's going on in the housing market right now, to be honest with you. We'll see what happens. But what happens when these inflection points, these major economic inflection points occurred, like the Depression, the Great Recession, COVID-19, businesses and consumers cut back on spending, which is going to have a negative effect on GDP, which I'll talk about in a couple of weeks. But what happens is the uncertainty just means that you and I are not going to go out to dinner as much. If I'm a business, I'm cutting back on spending. So we scale back till we kind of get a lay of the land and what's going on. Am I going to lose my job, or, what's going on? So So once we get through that phase, then what happens is we're in a pretty dark era time. But this is when innovations are created and new business models are introduced. So Uber, Airbnb, Tesla came all out of that area. Lyft, they all were innovated. All ideas came out of that, and then new technologies were forged together into bigger and better systems. We got a lot of IS folks in the class, so it's cloud, it's AI, and so when 2008 hit, and then we were working our way through 2019, we were 11 years in at that point, and we hadn't had a huge focus on investment. Now, what we know is both Democrats and Republicans knew that we needed to deal with infrastructure, but we weren't there yet. We couldn't get agreement on it. And so we know now is that at least it passed in the, and we'll start to see how this is going to come out. Historically, energy, transportation, and communication are big areas of infrastructure. What we're going to see now is the 5G and sustainable, electrification of automobiles will be another piece of it as well. And then that creates this new economic landscape. Typically, these resets, these periods of time, like after the Depression, fast forward 20 years, it's about 20 years. We hadn't hit 20 years. And then boom, COVID hits. So we got a double whammy. And what happened is, COVID's requiring a huge amount of government stimulus to get us through. And typically infrastructure requires a lot of government stimulation. And so there is a great worry just upon our national debt and how we're going to handle that. And so the debt is probably the biggest worry that we're going to have, whether you're on the left or right. It's just a big issue to be concerned about. So in 2008, this Great Recession was a huge inflection point. And what happened was, going back to Darwinian theory of economic survival, all of these brands had been weakened before that, and then they could not recover from it. So not only did these brands have to deal with a Great Recession, they also had to deal with other things that were happening in the industries that they were operating in. So let's talk about Blockbuster for a second. Blockbuster night, Friday night, fantastic brand. Every family in America looked forward to Friday night. They went in, they got their video, maybe, and then they brought it home. But there were issues with the brand because, I remember when my kids loved, the videos, I'd get a call from my older daughter. She's having a sleepover. Daddy, you got to go into Blockbuster, and we voted. We want this video for our sleepover, but you got to get there before 5 o'clock, else it won't be there, Dad. Okay, I will, sweetie. And then of course I go in and the video's not available, and I'm hoarding videos, and people are following me around waiting for whatever video I don't want. And then I bring the 3 videos home because I can't decide. I didn't have a cell phone, and she hates all 3, doesn't even watch them. I don't want them, and they just sit down on the counter all weekend, and I forget to bring them in on Monday. 25-30% of the revenue of Blockbuster was late fees, which is just terrible. And Blockbuster knew that, and they called it managed dissatisfaction. So Blockbuster, but it still was Blockbuster, and it was Blockbuster night, Friday night. But all of a sudden, then technology crept in, and so what happened were 2 things. First of all, this issue around VHS, these clunky cartridges that you might see in your parents' house. We still have some here, Disney movies and stuff like that. But what happened was, though, there was a conversion from VHS to DVD, right? And so when you start to think about what happened when VHS was converted to DVD, so Blockbuster was able to convert, so that wasn't that big of an issue. Blockbuster just said, "We'll start sending us the DVDs," which they did, but it wasn't so much what Blockbuster was doing. It was what was happening in its competitive arena. And it opened the door for two new brands to jump in and to be competitors to Blockbuster, right? And I know you know what those brands are, right? And so all of a sudden, the CEO founder of Netflix is sitting around with one of his buddies, and he gets a CD and he mails it to himself, and realizes, hey, I can mail this to me. So Netflix starts up. And then another brand, you know who it is. I know you know who it is, right? Redbox. They start up, and it's a little bit of a different business model, but it's still new entrants who are stealing market share away from Blockbuster. So remember what I said, cognitive dissonance? Blockbuster rejected that streaming video was going to be a long-term threat. And so they what they couldn't figure out though was how to deal with it. What they decided to do is they put in microwave popcorn, and they put in Coca-Cola or Pepsi or whatever, and Milk Duds and stuff. So they almost tried to put a Band-Aid on the issue, and they eventually were going into streaming video, but by that time it was too late. What was also going on at Blockbuster was that they had a revolving door at the top. They had multiple CEOs, and there was a lot of dysfunction, et cetera, et cetera. So Blockbusters, there might be one little Blockbuster store up in Alaska or something operating now. I don't know. But the reality is, it would be so easy for us all to go home tonight and to just type in blockbuster.com rather than netflix.com, and we would watch all our favorite shows or movies. So Blockbuster, they were in a paradigm. They couldn't move themselves away from the brick and mortar. They couldn't figure out how to repurpose their stores. They couldn't decide that they were going to double down into streaming video. And as a result, between Netflix and Redbox, and then eventually Amazon Prime, and of course Hulu jumped in. And so Blockbuster died. And it was an iconic brand for a number of years. Wasn't around that long, but the idea actually came from a couple down in Texas, and the gentleman was in IT, and the woman, his wife, was actually the brainchild of the brand. So they're gone. They're in essence gone. And you look at AP&P, they had 14,000 supermarkets at one time. They couldn't handle the competition from the regional chains like Wegmans, Publix, U-Crops, other chains all throughout the United States. The Limited lost their way. Borders that had to deal with Amazon.com, SNK had to deal with business casual. SNK Menswear is just like Men's Warehouse. By the way, S stands for Siegel, as in the Siegel Center. So they were headquartered out of the here in the Richmond area. Radio Shack lost sight of its widget, geeky customer. Toys R Us got too much debt and had to pay $300 to $400 million a year in interest expense. They went down because of Walmart and Amazon and Target. And then Circuit City was really about just the dysfunction of their culture and senior leadership team. And they were, of course, headquartered here in the Richmond area too. So two of these brands, SNK and Circuit City, were headquartered here. And I was a great customer of both. And I really loved Circuit City. I was not a Best Buy guy. I am now. For my business, my pure culture, I buy all my technology at Best Buy now. And I do go to Men's Warehouse, and I'll buy my, when I do need a suit or a coat or whatever, I'll go into Men's Warehouse to get it. But these were brands that died after this. But they were already weak ahead of time. And so when we think, guys, about strategic competitiveness, then strategic competitiveness is really about value creation. We'll talk a lot about that, value creation. And what's interesting and fun about value creation is what you perceive to be value in your life and what I might, are in essence potentially two different things. And so, when I think about going for a burger, and I think about what my options are. Right now, options I have within where I'm living. I have a Five Guys 6 minutes away. I have a Burger King 6 minutes away. I've got a Wendy's 7 minutes away. I've got a McDonald's about 8 minutes away. And I've got a Hardee's about 15 minutes away, a Sonic about 15 minutes away. And so, you start to look at where you drive and where you live and these sorts of things. And so when you compare a Five Guys to a McDonald's, and going back to this whole notion of identity and who they are, we start to realize that the value that you get from a Five Guys is very different from the value you get from a McDonald's. The value creation that's created by McDonald's is about convenience. It's about cheap or affordable, and it's about responsive or fast. The value creation for a Five Guys is customization, high quality, and high energy atmosphere. Two different concepts, but they coexist under the industry of burger restaurant industry, or I should say burger fast, quick serve burger industry, because you have other brands like Jack Brown and other brands that are into burgers, but they're going to be a sit down experience. And so Five Guys, maybe you spend $12 for what you see right before you. For the equivalent Big Mac and fries and a Diet Coke or Pepsi at McDonald's, you're going to pay $6.50. So it's almost twice what you're paying at McDonald's, but yet the Five Guys experience is really loved by enough people to keep Five Guys going. Oh, but by the way, we got quite a few Five Guys in town, but we don't have anywhere near the Five Guys that we have of the McDonald's. And so value creation is really what makes people fall in love with brands. That's the bottom line. Why do you like Apple? For some of you, and why others might like Samsung or Android. I mean, I have had the Pixel phone for a long time. Everything what I'm looking on right now is a Apple desktop. I've got a big Apple desktop in my office at work that's I actually own. I've got a MacBook, I've got an iPad, but yet I've still got the Pixel phone, but I think that's going to change pretty quick. I think I'm finally going to get an iPhone. I don't know if I'm going to wait till the 13 though. So it's a whole other story. It's about value creation. Why do you like Apple so much? Well, boy, those boxes are really neat, and I keep my box, or it's easy to start up, or whatever the case is. And so what we have to figure out is business owners are what's the value that we're creating for our customer base. And so we go back to Darwin again, and you got to have a value that is perceived to be significant for customers. These guys lost it. SNK had great value creation for a long time, lost it. Radio Shack lost it. Circuit City lost it. Blockbuster lost it. A&P lost it. While we're Capital One, and I'm a Capital One business customer, I love my Capital One. And I'm sure almost every one of you uses Amazon. A lot of you are Apple customers. Maybe not everybody in the house or Walmart, but Walmart has a lot of customers that love them. These brands are still finding their own way right here. McDonald's has done a really good job over the past year or so with their marketing. They connected with Travis Scott. I had one of the students from other section look it up. He's earned $20 million from McDonald's for his partnership with them. And going back to return on invested capital, McDonald's must be really happy with it, because they've signed a couple other folks to also be endorsers of their products. So the brand called McDonald's hasn't changed much. It's still convenient. It's still affordable, and it's still fast. But how it markets itself is ultimately what changing. BlackBerry was the first mover into the new generation smartphone. They got all cocky and arrogant in thinking Apple and Samsung would be or Android products would be a threat to them, and they found out that they were wrong. Kodak, of course, innovated the digital camera. Were afraid to market it because um, uh, it would compete and cannibalize its traditional market. And Blue Apron did really well in early COVID, but has struggled recently. So this is all about adaptation. Now, what do? You got to have this unique position in the marketplace within an industry that allows your brand to provide values to customers. So when I say unique position, I'm talking about a unique brand position. And so unique brand position is when I mentioned earlier about McDonald's, which is fast, convenient, and affordable. That's unique position. For Walmart, is cheap and convenient. That's a unique position. Now you can decide as a consumer whether or not you want to go to that brand and give them your money. That's up to you. That's up to you. And a brand that has done a really good job figuring this all out is Patagonia. Whether you use Patagonia or not, they have got a clear brand position. And another company, whether you like them or not, is Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is about fast and friendly service. It's about great, consistent food, and it's about a family atmosphere. Now, you might not like their interpretation of family, and you can choose not to shop with them. And more power to you if that is where you come up with your decision. A lot of people say, you know what, I'll overlook that because I like the taste of the product so much. I like the fact that their service is really good. So we'll talk more about Chick-fil-A as we get into the semester, but both Chick-fil-A and Patagonia and Walmart all have and Five Guys all have very clear brand positions. But again, guess what brand does not? Kmart. They've lost it. JCPenney, they've lost it. Sears, they've lost it. And so once you lose it, it's really hard to get the brand back. So when you think about having a clear brand position or clear, unique position, goes back to the mission of the brand, goes back to the promises of the brand. What are the promises? Fast, convenient, and affordable for McDonald's. Fast and friendly, consistent, great food, and family atmosphere for Chick-fil-A. and so that's the promises. And so all of these components right here create the unique position for a brand. For Patagonia, their mission is to save the home planet. Now you think about it and say, what? Save the home planet? But this is the founder, and that's what he has really clearly said about his mission. The promises are build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, and inspire others to do the same. The values are unconventional, transparent, high integrity, collaboration. And the clues are the way a brand communicates itself via its website. You go into Elwood Thompson or you go into Whole Foods, you got that smell. That's what we call a mechanic clue. The functionality, the website is a mechanic clue. The humanic clues are how you're treated by the people of the organization. We go back to Chick-fil-A for a second. One of their brand clues, we call them a humanic clue, is saying my pleasure after a customer says thank you. And then of course you have the community, which are all the people that are connected, emotionally connected to your brand. So this in itself helps you create the unique position in the marketplace, and it creates clarity. So you know your identity, you know who you are, and then customers can say, I love you, or I don't like you, or I hate you. And that is the way it is. So some of you like Target and some of you like Walmart. That's okay. Some of you really like Kroger. Some of you hate Kroger, but you like Wegmans. That's okay. That's the way it is. But there's got to be clear identity. So I'm not going to read all this to you. but I want you to read it and when you get a second, and because the whole semester we're going to be covering aspects of strategy, but what this does is it really articulates who Patagonia is. And so when you think about the brand itself and how it positions itself, how it goes to market, these are all really important elements of the brand called Patagonia. And and right out of the chute, you'll see it's a B corporation. When I record the lecture on strategic leadership, we'll talk about social entrepreneurship and running a socially responsible brand, which of course Patagonia is trying to do. So just take a second, at some point and read through it, because this is going to be an important component for you to understand, because it's be one of the things that you're going to have to help me understand when you write your paper on Lowe's. Okay, so you can see what I got on, right? I got on a t-shirt, and actually this is my Goodfellow t-shirt. It was $7. I bought it at Target. I bought it about a year ago. And but you can get a similar t-shirt at Patagonia for $30. You can get another similar t-shirt at Everlane for, this is $50, Everlane for $30, and then George is $10, and this is $7. So, and I bought this at Target. So these two brands right here are going after each other, but this t-shirt's $3 under this t-shirt right here. And so I live on a farm. I spent an hour weed whacking today. I'm out constantly on my tractor and in between classes or whatever. So boy, do I go through t-shirts. And so when I say I go through t-shirts, I wear t-shirts a lot. This is my second t-shirt of the day. So I've got quite a few t-shirts. I've got a Patagonia t-shirt. I've got one, and it says Patagonia on it. It's my only Patagonia t-shirt. That I bought, but my daughter got me one at a thrift shop for Father's Day, which is a very nice Patagonia t-shirt. But I don't have any Everlane products, but I'm really into Goodfellow. And so it's kind of weird. I've spent thousands of dollars at Patagonia for myself, for my kids, for my, family, friends. And so I love Patagonia, but yet I'm willing to buy a Goodfellow t-shirt. I don't want to spend $50 on t-shirts because they will get dirty. They'll get grungy. I'll probably stain them with gasoline. I don't know what I'm going to do. So it's better value for me. The value creation of Goodfellow is $7 for this versus 50, and it lasts a long time. I've had it a year. Still looks okay, don't you think? I mean, it looks okay. And so I haven't ever tried a George t-shirt. But this is, what do you want? Patagonia, there's a bit of, Patagucci, you know what I'm saying? So I have a Patagonia hat, right? I have this hat, and this is my dress hat. So I have my Patagonia hat. I will never wear this hat on my tractor. I will never wear this hat weed whacking. When I go out shopping, or my wife and I go to a restaurant and it's not a real fancy restaurant, I'm wearing this hat. And but I got my tractor hats, and I'll leave those suckers outside, and they can be in a rainstorm. I don't really care. I've got my Patagonia dress hat, my Boston Red Sox dress hat, and my Woodford Reserve. I love bourbon. I got that dress hat. So I got 3 dress hats. So I'm a huge Patagonia guy, but yet I won't, I'm not going to really spend money on their t-shirt. And there's going to be a video that you're going to be listening to of a dude who compared the Patagonia, Everlane, and George t-shirts. He should have thrown in Goodfellow there, but he didn't. So it's okay. We might, we might fall in love with the brand, but we're willing to jump outside it every once in a while. I'm a Target guy. I like Target. That's where I got this from. But I go to Walmart. I used to hate Walmart. When they came to town and were competing against me, I grounded my daughter for 30 days for using my credit card in a Walmart once, but I don't hate them anymore. I have a lot of respect for Walmart for what they do. They came in like the Attila the Hun, though, and they pillaged a lot of towns. A lot of mom and pops went out of business when they were trying to become the nation's largest food retailer by year 2000. So when, after the 91 recession, Patagonia did really well. And so they created a vision for themselves that they were going to start selling food. And that happened in 91, 92. And then they just went crazy building new stores. And by year 2000, they were the nation's largest food retailer. So they're still number one. Kroger's number two. Aldi's investing $5 billion to come in from Germany to become our nation's third largest retailer. And you probably know Aldi and Trader Joe's are cousins. They're both come out of the Aldi Nord and Aldi Süd in Germany, but Trader Joe's just has a different philosophy and different business model. So of course, COVID has been a huge inflection point for every organization. But what we know about inflection points, remember, it can be positive or it can be negative. And there were think about Zoom. You probably knew about Zoom. I didn't know about Zoom. And you think about how Zoom has done since COVID. They've done great. And even Airbnb's business model, they pivoted. They're still trying to figure out their financial side of their equation, but Airbnb overall did really well with COVID. But the cruise industry got killed initially. Airline industry got killed initially. Hospitality got killed initially. Rental car industry got killed initially. But many of them are now coming back. And so really dealing with these inflection points, including the Black Lives Matter movement that occurred. So we had COVID, we had Black Lives Matter during the 2020 year, and organizations have had to figure out how to adjust, how to pivot, and how to make bets on both areas. And that's what businesses have to do. That's what CEOs have to do. They have to figure out what do they need to do? What bets do they need to make to help their organization survive and then thrive later on? And so what we're going to be studying as we think about the continuation of our course are all these things that come into the world of businesses, and then how businesses react to it. What we know is that no matter what your position is, there are trade-offs. So we know for Five Guys, customization, high quality, high energy atmosphere in their stores. Now there's a trade-off of that, and the trade-off is price. You're going to pay more for a Five Guys. So when you're a strategic leader, you're looking at all of these trade-offs about growth. And because you can't make everybody love you, right? Again, I can't make you love me if you don't. So don't try, because you're not going to appeal. The core target customer may go into Walmart from time to time. I do, but it's going to be really hard to convert a core hardcore target customer into being a hardcore Walmart customer. But here's what's interesting about COVID, going back to the inflection points again. You got a lot of people who did not like shopping inside of a Walmart because they're so crowded, it's not that clean usually, et cetera, et cetera. So they would rather go into a Kroger. Well, what's happened during COVID that actually Walmart has done a really good job with a concept called BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store. So you've got a lot of customers who never normally would shop Walmart that are now shopping Walmart. So it's an interesting phenomenon. So Walmart's done a really good job bringing some newer customer in that they were able not to bring in before. So the questions then are got the brand promises. So again, I'm talking about, fast, convenient, affordable, fast and friendly service, great consistent food, family atmosphere. Brands have to have a focus, and the focus is on who they are, what their identity is, and the promises they're making to customers. What are the strategies? You've heard the term on brand, off brand. What are the on-brand strategies that relate to the brand promises? Don't make strategies that go against what the brand stands for. Like Target, like Walmart tried to do many years ago. They got jealous of Target, so they tried to put in a higher end style women's line, but it didn't work. The customer saying, "What are you trying to be like Target? Be who you are. Worry about who you are. Where do we allocate resources, and what activities should we pursue or not pursue?" Now, what do I mean by activities? An activity could be something that a brand does that makes it unique. So the activities, if you think about a Chick-fil-A, going outside, having, most drive-throughs, people are inside. What does Chick-fil-A do? They send their staff outside, and they've created double and even some cases triple drive-throughs. Those are activities, and that gets back to a belief in what we call core competency around operational excellence. We'll talk more about that later on in the semester. Here's another little favorite brand of mine called Milk Bar. Its founder went to JMU, Christina Tosi, and she's got a new Netflix show coming up. My son-in-law is their CFO and head of operations, but they pivoted really well. They had brick and mortar retail bakeries before the pandemic. They shut all those down, and they really invested heavy in online, and they did a really fabulous job for it. But it's not cheap. It's not cheap. It's delicious, but it's expensive. So COVID-19, remember I talked about those brands that went down after the Great Reset. Hertz filed bankruptcy, Brooks Brothers, Gold's Gym, JCPenney, Lord & Taylor, they might even be gone, I don't know. GNC. These brands were weak before COVID, and then COVID came in and it even weakened them more, and they had to file for Chapter 11. So when we start to really see and ask the question about why do some brands survive? And see that brand called Hudson Bay Company? Look at the year it was formed, 1670. It actually was formed in 1668. They were two entrepreneurs. They were fur traders. They're up in Canada. They got investors finally. And so they have been around since 1670, the oldest company in North America. It is crazy. Just sit back and think about that for a second, right? So think about the fact that they've been around for 350 years. It's just unbelievable. Circuit City couldn't do it. SNK couldn't do it. Blockbuster couldn't do it. But this brand's been around, and guess who they own? They own a brand called Saks Fifth Avenue. And so a lot of department stores have been getting hit hard even before COVID because of e-commerce, but it's still with us. It's still a viable brand. It's going through some tough times right now, but it's still here. So the characteristics of why some brands survive and others do not. One, the brand has a compelling competitive advantage. I started introducing this concept called competitive advantage. We'll talk more about that in Chapter 5. And Warren Buffett likes to call that the moat. And so that relates directly to the brand position and everything that you have. So you start to ask about Apple Computer, and all the things that Apple does. Apple's got a really deep moat. Once they bring you in, they continue to try to innovate and get better and make it really difficult for you to leave and go somewhere else. And so Apple has constantly tried to strive to make great products and great services, and they will continue to do that with streaming video. Apple is not a first mover. Apple typically waits to let somebody else go in, and then they look at the product, they look at the service, and they're going to try to do it better. And so we'll see what's going to happen with Apple in that regard. Two, remember the Harley Davidson story. Harley had a compelling product, the motorcycle, for decades. Then its core customer, the demand that was purchasing that product, started to get old and no longer would be able to buy the product. And so Harley now is trying to figure out who is its new core customer. It's doing pretty good in India, right? International was its tertiary for many years, where the male baby boomer was number one, primary, female baby boomer was two, secondary, international was tertiary. And that's all messed up right now. And so they're trying to figure out where their demand's coming from. But they're trying to appeal to the baby or to the millennials, so they will become their new core customer. And it's a struggle for them. 3, there's a sustainable economic way to produce and sell the product or service. So you have a business model that takes into account everything that's needed to make something. So let's go back to Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A has to buy its chicken and the potatoes and the lettuce and the tomatoes and the strawberries and everything that goes into their products. And then it has to pay for the labor to make the products. And then it has to pay for the cost of the building, et cetera, et cetera. So at the end of the day, at the end of every day, Chick-fil-A has to have a business model where it's breaking even and even well above that, so it's making profit. So if you think about the Wegman stores, and if you've been in a Wegman store, the Wegman stores require about $1 million of revenue a week. So they got to do $1 million in sales a week just to break even, ladies and gentlemen, just to break even. So think about when you went into Wegmans, if you've been into Wegmans, or your parents went into Wegmans, or your aunt or uncle or whoever went into Wegmans, right? And the order was $100 or $150 or $200. Think about how many different orders have to occur to make up $1 million just to break even, just to break even. Now, the 2 Wegman stores here in Richmond area, I don't know exactly what they're generating in revenue per week. My guess is they're both doing probably somewhere between 1.4, 1.6 million each a week. Could be completely off. That's what my intuition tells me. I think we've got a few folks from Sterling in this class. The Sterling Wegmans is the highest volume Wegmans in the United States. At least it was. It was doing over $2 million a week. So there's got to be an economical way. So for a company like Uber, they haven't figured this out yet, believe it or not. And they've been around for a long time. It took Yelp maybe 11, 12 years to figure out its economic model. Airbnb went public. They did well the first quarter, and then they've lost money since. I'm not sure how their third quarter is going. And I know some of you, particularly in finance, have heard about the concept of a SPAC, which is called a Special Purchase Acquisition Company. And a SPAC were created simply to merge with some of these startups that haven't figured out their business model and give them a head start and give them an infusion of capital to be able to grow their product. So number 3 is really important. And what happened with COVID is, for Carnival or an airline, the revenue fell back, and as a result, they had all this overhead that they had to pay for, and they couldn't pay for it. So they wanted government money, or they had to go to the street to borrow more money to keep themselves afloat. Now, if you need more money, you got a banker or private equity or an angel investor that's going to help you out. That's Access Cattle. You got a great team. Talk more about that in a couple of weeks. And going back to Darwin, this is the ability to adjust. So this is about resilience. Being able to, to change procedures, to change activities, to change behavior when confronted with these inflection points that come in. And remember, an inflection point can be either a threat or an opportunity. And you might be able to position yourself to catch the wave. We've got now 4 COVID waves. And some companies position themselves in a way, and I hate to say it this way, to catch the first wave of COVID and turn it into an opportunity for them. Hate to say that, right? Particularly since my sister-in-law passed with COVID. But that's what organizations do. When 9/11 hit, there were companies who positioned themselves to benefit from 9/11. It was a terrible tragedy, but they looked at it as an opportunity. And those companies tended to be in the security technology arena. And so when we think about why some brands survive and why others do not, we know SNK lost, it was no longer compelling. Blockbuster was no longer compelling. Harley is losing its demand. Victoria's Secret even lost its demand. The male baby boomer was driving Victoria's Secret for decades. And then once they turned 50, they quit buying it. And so Victoria's Secret had to find a new demand. And so they concentrated on the younger female and her mother. And that's what brands do. They have to adjust. They have to pivot over time, ultimately to be successful. So what we're going to be doing this semester then is we're going to be working our way through this model from start to finish. We're, of course, in module 1. We'll be moving into module 2. And remember, I'm recording that lecture for you. That'll be available next week. And then each one of these represents a model, a module that we'll be working our way through. So with when we think about then the semester, we'll be covering